In the vastness of the Andromeda sector, where galaxies danced in spirals of ancient light, a small, seemingly insignificant planet orbited a pair of suns. Its name was Calestis Minor, a speck of rock with little to offer beyond its rare mineral deposits, and an atmosphere that smelled faintly of ozone and pine. Few paid attention to it, and fewer still would have imagined it as the stage for one of the strangest confrontations in recorded galactic history. Commander Erin Valen sat in the command chair of the Starfire Echo, her flagship and pride of the United Intergalactic Fleet. Erin was a woman who thrived on challenges. Her reputation for quick thinking and unshakable resolve had saved colonies, brokered peace treaties, and navigated the treacherous politics of interstellar alliances. But nothing in her storied career had prepared her for what the ship's scanners were now showing. "Repeat that," she said, her voice calm but edged with disbelief. The AI, a smooth-voiced entity named Nexus, obliged without hesitation. "An unidentified craft has been detected in low orbit above Calestis Minor. It is equipped with a projectile-based weapon resembling an ancient Earth device known as a slingshot." Erin frowned, leaning forward as the holographic display above the console sharpened into focus. The alien craft appeared on the screen, and the entire bridge crew went silent. The vessel was unlike anything they'd seen, an awkward amalgamation of haphazard metal plates, erratic propulsion systems, and a weapon that could only be described as laughable. It truly was a slingshot, albeit one scaled to an absurd size. Its elastic band glimmered with an otherworldly sheen, and its handle was reinforced with materials that the scanners identified as nearly indestructible. Lieutenant Corin Oakes, the ship's engineer and unofficial expert on ancient Earth technology, let out a low whistle. "I mean, they've got to be joking, right? That thing couldn't even launch a pebble into orbit, let alone pose a threat." Erin rubbed her temples. "Nexus, are you certain this isn't a decoy or a misread? Maybe it's some kind of scanning equipment disguised as—" "No, Commander," Nexus interrupted smoothly. "All data confirms its primary function is as a weapon. Preliminary scans also indicate it is active." Erin glanced at her second-in-command, Lyra Torin, who stood to her right with her arms crossed. Lyra, a seasoned diplomat with nerves of steel, raised an eyebrow and gave a dry smile. "Well, it's certainly creative. Though I have to wonder what they're planning to launch with that thing. A warning shot? A particularly large fruit?" The bridge crew chuckled nervously, but the tension in the room was palpable. They all knew this wasn't the time for jokes. Calestis Minor had called for assistance after detecting what they believed to be an impending attack from the hostile Dralux Syndicate, a notoriously ruthless faction. The Dralux didn't negotiate, and they didn't bluff. When they wanted a planet, they took it, usually leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. And yet, here was the local planetary defense force, apparently pinning their hopes on a weapon that looked like it belonged in a child's playroom. Erin sighed. "Open a channel to Calestis Minor's Defense Council." The comms officer nodded, and moments later, a holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the bridge. The alien representative of the planet appeared, an individual resembling an Earth platypus, complete with a leathery beak and webbed fingers. The being's wide, unblinking eyes darted nervously as it began to speak in halting galactic common. "Commander Valen, thank you for responding so quickly to our distress call. I am Dreyvik, Chief Strategist of Calestis Minor's Defense Council." Erin stood, offering a polite nod. "Chief Dreyvik, we're here to assist. However, I need clarification on that." She gestured toward the holographic image of the slingshot-like weapon. Dreyvik's beak twitched, and it was hard to tell whether the expression was one of pride or embarrassment. "Ah, yes. The Resolute Mark III. Our most advanced defensive mechanism." Corin snorted audibly, earning a glare from Erin. "With respect," she said carefully, "how exactly is this mechanism intended to defend against a fleet as advanced and aggressive as the Dralux Syndicate?" Dreyvik straightened, his webbed fingers clasping in what seemed to be a gesture of confidence. "It may appear unorthodox, but the Resolute Mark III is a technological marvel. It is designed to launch projectiles coated in a destabilizing energy matrix that disrupts the molecular integrity of enemy ships. Aaron blinked. So it's not just a giant rubber band? Absolutely not. Dravik bristled. The elastic core is infused with quantum filaments that amplify the energy output upon release. The result is an impact capable of breaching even the most robust hulls. Lyra leaned closer to Aaron, her voice low. He sounds like he believes it, at least. Aaron wasn't so sure. And this has been tested in combat scenarios? Dravik hesitated. Field testing has been limited. But the simulations are highly promising. Corin muttered under his breath. Great. We're betting on simulations. Aaron shot him a look but couldn't entirely disagree. She turned back to Dravik. The Dralek's fleet is expected to arrive within hours. Are you certain this is the best option available to you? Dravik's beak drooped slightly, a gesture that Aaron interpreted as resignation. Commander, our resources are limited. The Draleks have targeted our planet precisely because they believe us to be weak. The Resolute Mark III represents our ingenuity and determination to survive. We may not have their firepower, but we have spirit. The bridge fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. For all its absurdity, the slingshot was a symbol of defiance, a desperate gamble in the face of overwhelming odds. Aaron's tactical mind churned as she considered the possibilities. The weapon might be ridiculous, but she'd seen stranger things work in the heat of battle. Perhaps it wasn't the weapon itself that mattered but the courage it represented. Finally, she nodded. Very well, Chief Dravik. We'll coordinate with your team to ensure the best possible outcome. But I'd like to see this weapon in action, if only to assess its capabilities. Dravik's eyes brightened. Of course. I will arrange a demonstration immediately. As the hologram faded, Aaron turned to her crew. Prepare for the worst but stay open to possibilities. If the Draleks arrive before we're ready, we'll need every advantage we can get, even if it comes from a glorified rubber band. Lyra chuckled softly. You really think this thing might work? Aaron allowed herself a faint smile. I've learned not to underestimate desperate ingenuity. Let's just hope the Draleks do the same. The crew got to work, a mix of skepticism and determination filling the air. Outside the ship's viewport, the twin suns of Calestis Minor cast a golden glow over the planet below, as if heralding the storm that was sure to come. Whatever the outcome, Aaron knew one thing for certain: this was going to be a battle like no other. The twin suns of Calestis Minor dipped lower on the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of red and orange as preparations for the impending attack accelerated. The Starfire Echo orbited just above the planet, its crew working furiously to coordinate defensive efforts with the local forces. Commander Aaron Valen stood in the war room, her holographic display filled with tactical readouts and projections. All indicators pointed to the same grim reality. The Dralek Syndicate was closing in, and they were bringing a fleet powerful enough to vaporize the entire planet. Aaron's mind raced through strategies, but her thoughts kept returning to the absurdity of their primary defense, a planetary slingshot capable of launching a single energy-charged projectile at a time. It was an idea so ridiculous that even imagining it as part of a battle report felt like a cruel joke. The holographic figure of Chief Dravik reappeared on the display, his beak twitching nervously. Commander Valen, the Resolute Mark III is prepped and ready for its first live-fire test. We thought it best to conduct the trial under your observation. Good, Aaron said, though her tone lacked conviction. We'll monitor from the bridge. Proceed when ready. The war room dimmed as the live feed from the surface flickered into view. The Resolute Mark III stood perched on a rocky plateau, its towering frame jutting into the crimson sky like an ancient relic of a forgotten era. Around it, Calestis Minor's defense team, a motley collection of engineers, scientists, and volunteers, scrambled to make final adjustments. At the slingshot's base, a gleaming metallic sphere rested in its cradle, humming faintly with energy. This was the projectile, a quantum destabilizing warhead designed to unravel molecular bonds on impact. Corin Oakes leaned in from the engineering console, squinting at the feed. I'll give them this much: the projectile's energy readings are impressive. If they can actually hit something with it, we might have a chance. Lyra, ever the skeptic, raised an eyebrow. And that's a very big if. Do they even have targeting systems on that thing? Aaron sighed. Let's find out. On the screen, Dravik raised his webbed hands in what seemed to be a ceremonial gesture. The alien's voice carried through the comms. Activating the Resolute Mark III for its maiden test. Stand by. The defense team scattered to safe distances as the elastic bands of the slingshot began to stretch. The hum of energy grew louder, a low, resonating sound that vibrated through the Starfire Echo's speakers. The metallic sphere glowed brighter, pulsing with an almost hypnotic rhythm. And then it launched. The projectile hurtled through the atmosphere, leaving a trail of shimmering light in its wake. The slingshot's elastic band snapped back with a resounding twang, sending shockwaves rippling through the plateau. For a moment, it seemed almost beautiful, a streak of brilliance cutting across the alien sky. But then the sphere veered off course. Aaron winced as the projectile wobbled in midair, its trajectory spiraling wildly before crashing into a nearby mountain. The explosion was spectacular, an eruption of blinding light and crackling energy that reduced half the peak to rubble. But the result was far from encouraging. Effective, Corin said dryly. Assuming the Draleks planned to invade as a geological formation. Dravik's hologram reappeared, looking flustered. A minor calibration issue, I assure you. We'll have it resolved before the Draleks arrive. See that you do, Aaron replied, her patience wearing thin. We don't have time for more calibration issues. As the call ended, Nexus's calm voice interrupted. Commander, long-range sensors have detected multiple signatures exiting hyperspace. Estimated time to arrival, 3 hours. Aaron felt her stomach knot. It's them. The Draleks fleet had arrived earlier than anticipated, and from the initial readings, it was worse than they feared. Dozens of warships, each bristling with weapons, were closing in on Calestis Minor. Their formation was precise, predatory, and utterly intimidating. We need a plan, Lyra said, her voice tight. And we need it now. Aaron nodded, her mind racing. She turned to Corin. Can we modify the Resolute Mark III? Improve its accuracy? Corin frowned, tapping at his console. Theoretically, yes. But it's not just the targeting system, it's the propulsion mechanics. That thing's a relic. Even with adjustments, there's no guarantee it'll work in live combat. It has to, Aaron said firmly. We don't have another choice. The crew sprang into action, working in tandem with Calestis Minor's defense team to implement a series of emergency upgrades. Nexus fed them streams of data, mapping out potential trajectories and weak points in the Draleks fleet. Time ticked by with agonizing speed, every second bringing the enemy closer. Meanwhile, Dravik's team prepared for a desperate gamble. The slingshot's engineers dismantled sections of the weapon, replacing outdated components with makeshift solutions provided by the Starfire Echo. Corin supervised the process remotely, his voice a constant presence over the comms as he barked instructions and occasionally muttered curses under his breath. As the modifications progressed, the tension aboard the Starfire Echo reached a breaking point. The bridge crew watched in silence as the Draleks fleet appeared on the ship's main display, a wall of ships gliding ominously toward the planet. Their flagship, a massive vessel known as the Sovereign's Wrath, loomed at the center of the formation, its jagged silhouette casting a shadow over the smaller ships around it. Comms request from the Draleks flagship, Nexus announced. Aaron stiffened. On screen. The image of the Sovereign's Wrath faded, replaced by the face of the Draleks commander. He was a towering figure with scaled skin that shimmered like molten metal. His eyes were piercing, glowing faintly as he regarded Aaron with a mixture of amusement and disdain. Commander Valiant, he said, his voice a low growl. You've come to defend this pitiful planet? How noble! And how futile! Aaron met his gaze without flinching. Calestis Minor is under our protection. If you attack, you'll face the full force of the United Intergalactic Fleet. The Draleks commander chuckled, a sound that sent a chill through the bridge. Empty threats, You're outnumbered, outgunned, and entirely outmatched. Surrender the planet, and I might spare your lives. Not an option, Aaron said firmly. The commander's smirk vanished. Then you've sealed your fate. Prepare to be annihilated. The screen went dark, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Lyra exhaled slowly. He's not bluffing. No, Aaron agreed. But neither are we. She turned to Nexus. Status on the Resolute Mark III? Upgrades are 90% complete, the AI reported. Projected readiness in 20 minutes. Good, Aaron said. Because if this thing doesn't work, we won't last 5. As the final preparations came together, Aaron couldn't shake the sense of impending doom. The Dralics were relentless, their fleet an unstoppable juggernaut. But she also knew that desperation had a way of turning the impossible into reality. If the slingshot could even take out the Sovereign's wrath, it might be enough to force a retreat. The countdown to battle had begun, and the galaxy held its breath. The galaxy seemed to pause as the Dralics' fleet loomed closer, their warships casting long shadows over Calestis Minor. The twin suns dipped further below the horizon, leaving the planet in an eerie twilight. On board the Starfire Echo, Commander Aaron Valance stood on the bridge, her hands gripping the console as the crew finalized preparations for what could be their last stand. The Resolute Mark III, that absurdly oversized slingshot, had been upgraded to its limits, but whether it would work was still a gamble with odds that felt stacked against them. All ships are reporting ready positions, Commander, Lyra said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. Planetary defenses are armed, though limited. Limited is an understatement, Corin muttered from the engineering station. If that slingshot doesn't hit something critical, this is going to be a very short battle. Aaron glanced at the holographic display of the approaching fleet. The Sovereign's wrath stood out like a leviathan among sharks, its jagged hull bristling with weaponry. The Dralics formation moved with calculated precision, a predator circling its prey. Every instinct told her they were outmatched, but giving up was not an option. Nexus, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. Status on the Resolute Mark III? The upgrades are complete, Commander, the AI replied. The projectile is armed and calibrated. However, I must caution that the system's accuracy remains untested under live combat conditions. Aaron exhaled slowly. It's going to have to be good enough. Relay coordinates to Drevik's team. Target the Sovereign's wrath. We'll cut off the head of the beast. Acknowledged, Nexus said. Transmission sent. As Nexus worked, the comms crackled to life with a message from Dravik. The alien's voice, though shaky, carried a note of determined pride. Commander Valen, we are locked onto the target. Awaiting your signal to fire. Stand by, Aaron said, her eyes fixed on the display. We need to draw their attention first. She turned to Lyra. Patch me through to the fleet. Moments later, her voice echoed across the comms. This is Commander Valen to all Allied ships. Engage the Dralics fleet at will. Focus fire on their smaller vessels, but keep your distance from the flagship. Let's make them work for every inch. The Starfire Echo shuddered as its weapons roared to life, joined by the rest of the fleet. Plasma beams and energy pulses lit up the darkness, streaking toward the Dralics ships in bursts of blue and gold. The first volley struck true, tearing into the hulls of the forward Dralics frigates. Explosions rippled across their formation, but the enemy ships responded with ruthless efficiency. Their return fire was devastating, lances of crimson energy slicing through the void, overwhelming smaller Allied ships in moments. The battle erupted into chaos. Ships weaved and darted through fields of fire, their shields flickering under the relentless assault. Aaron's crew worked with precision, Nexus directing the Starfire Echo's defenses while Corin and Lyra coordinated repairs and tactics. Despite their best efforts, it was clear the Dralics held the upper hand. Shields at 60%, Nexus reported. Enemy fire intensifying. Aaron clenched her jaw. Hold steady. Dravik, are you ready to fire? Ready and awaiting your command, came the reply. Aaron's gaze locked onto the Sovereign's wrath on the display. The flagship was pushing forward, its weapons targeting the Allied fleet's strongest ships. It was a bold move, one that left it exposed for a brief moment. "Now's our chance," she said. "Dravik, fire the Resolute Mark III!" On the surface, the Resolute Mark III sprang to life. The elastic band stretched, trembling with barely contained energy as the projectile began to glow. Engineers shouted commands, and Dravik himself pressed the activation button. The slingshot released with a resounding twang, sending the quantum destabilizing sphere hurtling skyward. It streaked through the atmosphere, a comet of blinding light racing toward the Sovereign's wrath. The bridge of the Starfire Echo went silent as everyone watched the display. The projectile arced through space, its trajectory holding steady, until it veered slightly off course. Gasps filled the room as the sphere missed the flagship by a hair's breadth, colliding instead with one of its escort ships. The resulting explosion was massive, a wave of energy that obliterated the smaller ship and sent nearby vessels spinning out of formation. "That's not good enough," Corin muttered, his frustration evident. "We need a direct hit on the flagship." Dravik's voice crackled over the comms. "Apologies, Commander. We're recalibrating for another shot." Aaron didn't have time to respond. The Sovereign's wrath had turned its full attention to the Resolute Mark III. The Dralek's commander, no longer amused, barked orders to his fleet, and a barrage of crimson fire rained down on the planet's surface. "Protect that weapon!" Aaron shouted. "Deploy interceptors to draw their fire." Small fighter ships launched from the Starfire Echo, diving toward the Dralek's fleet in a desperate bid to shield the Resolute Mark III. The slingshot's operators scrambled to reload, their movements frantic as enemy fire closed in. Another projectile was prepared, its surface glowing brighter than the first. "Target recalibrated," Nexus announced. "Dravik's team is ready to fire." Aaron's voice was sharp. "Dravik, this is it. Take the shot." Once more, the Resolute Mark III fired. The projectile shot through the sky, cutting a straight path toward the Sovereign's wrath. Time seemed to stretch as the sphere closed the distance. This time, there was no deviation, no wobble. It struck the flagship dead center, its quantum destabilizing energy detonating on impact. The explosion was catastrophic. The Sovereign's wrath erupted in a cascade of light and debris, its hull disintegrating as the energy rippled through its systems. The flagship's destruction sent shockwaves through the Dralek's fleet, both literal and psychological. Their formation faltered, ships breaking away in disarray as panic took hold. Cheers erupted on the Starfire Echo's bridge, but Aaron raised a hand to silence them. "It's not over yet," she said. "Target their remaining ships. Don't give them a chance to regroup." The Allied fleet pressed the advantage, picking off the scattered Dralek's vessels one by one. Without their flagship, the enemy's coordination crumbled, and their remaining ships retreated into hyperspace. The battle was won, but the cost had been high. Debris from both sides littered the void, a stark reminder of the sacrifice that had been made. Aaron slumped back in her chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Lyra placed a hand on her shoulder. "We did it," she said softly. Aaron nodded, though her mind was already racing ahead. The Resolute Mark III had proven itself, but it was still a desperate, improvised weapon. If the Draleks returned with a larger force, they wouldn't be so easily deterred. For now, though, the galaxy could breathe a little easier. They had faced the impossible and emerged victorious, thanks, improbably, to the stupidest weapon Aaron had ever seen. The silence following the Dralek's retreat was almost as deafening as the battle itself. Across the bridge of the Starfire Echo, the crew remained frozen, their disbelief at the victory palpable. The Sovereign's wrath had been destroyed, the Dralek's fleet scattered, and Caelestis Minor still stood, albeit singed and shaken. For a fleeting moment, Commander Aaron Valen allowed herself a small smile. Against all odds, they had won. "Status report," she said, breaking the silence. Nexus's calm voice filled the bridge. "Allied casualties are significant but not catastrophic. Remaining enemy ships have retreated beyond sensor range. The Resolute Mark III remains operational, though its structural integrity has been compromised from recoil stress. Aaron nodded. Relay the damage reports to engineering and begin coordinating relief efforts with Calestis miners' surface teams. We need to stabilize the situation before the Dralics regroup. The holographic image of Chief Dravik flickered onto the display, his usually unflappable beak quivering with emotion. Commander Valen, he began, his voice breaking slightly. On behalf of the people of Calestis Minor, I cannot thank you enough. You and your fleet have saved our planet. Aaron held up a hand. Save the thanks for your own people, Dravik. If it weren't for your team's ingenuity and the Resolute Mark III, this battle would have ended very differently. Dravik's eyes brightened, a mix of pride and relief washing over him. Even so, without your guidance, we would not have lasted long enough to make use of it. Your fleet's sacrifice will not be forgotten. As the hologram faded, Aaron turned her attention back to her crew. Lyra, still at her side, gave her a sly grin. You know, I never thought I'd live to see the day when a giant slingshot saved a planet. Aaron chuckled, the sound breaking through her fatigue. I'm not sure anyone's going to believe it when we write this up. The Resolute Mark III, Galaxy's dumbest weapon, saves the day. Corin snorted from his station. If you don't call it that, I will. Despite the levity, Aaron knew the victory was tenuous. The Dralic Syndicate wasn't known for retreating quietly. If anything, their pride and thirst for revenge would likely bring them back with a larger fleet. The thought lingered at the back of her mind as she reviewed the battle's aftermath. Hours passed as the crew worked tirelessly to stabilize the situation. Relief shuttles ferried supplies to the planet's surface, rescuing survivors and tending to the wounded. The Allied fleet, battered but functional, regrouped in orbit, their crews patching up what they could. Meanwhile, Calestis miners' defense teams swarmed the Resolute Mark III, inspecting the weapon for damage and discussing ways to improve its design. Aaron made her way to the war room, where Nexus was compiling data from the battle. The AI's holographic avatar materialized, its serene face betraying none of the chaos they had just survived. Commander, Nexus began. I've analyzed the Resolute Mark III's performance and identified potential enhancements. With the proper resources, its accuracy and firepower could be significantly improved. Aaron raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting we keep using it? Given the effectiveness of the quantum destabilizing projectile, it would be unwise to dismiss it entirely. While unconventional, the weapon demonstrated unique capabilities that could be refined for future engagements. She sighed, leaning against the console. The galaxy is going to have a field day when word of this gets out. Indeed, Nexus replied. But it may also serve as a deterrent. The Dralic Syndicate is unlikely to forget the destruction of their flagship. Aaron wasn't so sure. The Dralics were prideful, and their defeat would sting. But perhaps that was a problem for another day. Right now, the priority was ensuring that Calestis Minor could stand on its own if, when, the Dralics returned. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. It was Lyra, standing in the doorway with a datapad in hand. You've got to see this. Aaron followed her to the bridge, where a live feed from the surface was playing on the main display. It showed the people of Calestis Minor, those strange, beak-faced aliens, gathered around the Resolute Mark III. They were cheering, singing, and performing what appeared to be a victory dance. The slingshot, now adorned with ribbons and banners, had become a symbol of hope. They're calling it the Defender of Calestis, Lyra said, smirking. A bit grandiose for a rubber band and a rock, don't you think? Aaron smiled despite herself. Let them have it. They've earned this. As the celebrations continued, Aaron's mind wandered back to the battle. It wasn't just the weapon that had won the day. It was the determination of a planet's people, the creativity of her crew, and a little bit of sheer, unbridled madness. The galaxy's greatest conflicts were often decided not by the most powerful weapons, but by those willing to try the improbable. Later that night, as the bridge settled into a quieter rhythm, Aaron stood by the viewport, gazing at the stars. The Starfire Echo hummed softly, its systems cycling down after the battle. Lyra joined her, holding 2 cups of steaming liquid. Figured you could use this. she said, handing one to Aaron. Thanks, Aaron replied, taking a sip. The warmth spread through her, chasing away some of the lingering fatigue. You think they'll be okay? She asked, nodding toward the planet below. Lyra shrugged. They've got spirit, I'll give them that. And with a few tweaks to their defenses, they might actually stand a chance next time. Aaron nodded, her gaze drifting to the Resolute Mark III. We'll make sure they're ready. The Dralux won't get the last word. Damn right they won't, Lyra said with a grin. As the ship drifted through the quiet expanse of space, Erin allowed herself a rare moment of peace. They had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious, proving that even the most unconventional tools could turn the tide of battle. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, filled with dangers and wonders alike. But if there was one thing Erin had learned, it was that sometimes, the stupidest ideas could save the day. And maybe, just maybe, the Resolute Mark III wasn't so stupid after all.